Hello there fellow acolytes of the Sega Saturn, and welcome to another Saturn Gems video, the series where I look at hidden gems, well-known gems, Japanese gems and local gems. So hopefully something there for everyone. I'm gonna kickstart with a title that should be very well known. It's Virtua Cop 2. Virtua Cop 2 is probably best known from the arcades. It was a very popular arcade game and found its way to the Sega Saturn, and it's just as great as it was in the arcades. You play as a cop in Virtua City and you go through 3 levels, an easy, medium and hard level. Fighting your way through, there's some optional paths that you can take. So for example, on the first level there's a car chase and you can turn and follow the street, or you can go on Seaside Drive or whatever the name is, and it's a different path and there are different things to do, different situations, and it just adds a little bit of extra replayability. Not that it really even needs that to increase the replayability, because the game is just so fun that you'll want to play it again and again. It supports a Saturn light gun, so you can use that, but you will need a CRT television. If you're playing with the light gun, of course it's miles better. However, if you don't have a CRT or you don't have a light gun, it's not really that big of an issue, because even with a controller, it's still a lot of fun to play. It's also a game that's dirt cheap. I have the Japanese version, which I picked up for a few quid, and the Japanese version is completely in English, so there's literally no difference. But if you fancy the long box and you want to pay a little bit extra, you're probably not going to be paying more than a tenner to get hold of it. So I would say it's definitely worth picking up. The next game on my list is another arcadey style game, although I don't believe it was ever in the arcades. I know it was definitely released on the Saturn and the PlayStation. In fact, I think the PlayStation's probably the more well-known version. And that's Courier Crisis. Courier Crisis is a game where you control a courier on a bicycle and you need to deliver letters. So you go around these small streets, you pick letters up from people and you have to deliver it to someone else in the city. And you get points based on speed, and you have to deliver maybe 2 or 3 letters per area, and then you move on to the next area. The money you earn can get you better bikes, and you can progress from there. The best way to describe it is simply just to compare it to its spiritual successor, which is Crazy Taxi. Crazy Taxi came afterwards, and the game is basically the same. If you've ever played Crazy Taxi, it's the same but on a bicycle. And that's all there really is to it. The game has received some flack, mainly to do with the controls. It can be a bit iffy to turn the bike, but it's not too bad. If you let go of accelerate and turn, you kind of get used to it, and it's not overly bad. The game is relatively cheap if you pick up a Japanese version, which is the one I have, and as you'll see from the gameplay footage, honestly, it's very accessible. There's very little you have to worry about that's in Japanese. A lot of it is in English, so you won't really have a tough time playing it. The English version will actually set you back a fair amount. I think the English versions can go for a couple of £100. So I would say the game's definitely not worth that. Pick up a Japanese version instead and you'll have a great time. As I say, a lot of people don't like it, but honestly, if you like Crazy Taxi, I think you'll really dig this too. The next game on my list is an interesting game. It's a game I didn't pick up for the longest time because it was just described as an action RPG. Now, as you may remember from my first Gems video, I am not a massive fan of RPGs. In fact, there are very few I like. Dark Savior, on the other hand, after playing it, it's not an RPG. I don't know why it gets described as an RPG, it's nothing like an RPG. There is a certain kind of experience thing that you get after battling, and you can use that to upgrade your health. But honestly, it makes very little difference. On my playthrough, I didn't upgrade my health once, and it didn't actually matter. Similarly, any weapons you acquire throughout the game, I think all apart from maybe one, which you can acquire near the start, all of them you get as part of the main game. So it's not like an RPG at all. In fact, when it comes to the combat, there's no random battles. The encounters that you do are set battles. These set battles themselves are kind of interesting. They're not turn-based or anything. They work like a fighting game. So you have an attack button, and you've got some basic attack ones you can do, like a backwards attack, a low attack, a high attack. It's very kind of basic. You're not going to be putting loads of complicated button combinations to pull off. But you do these basic fighting battles, and like a normal fighting game, you take down your opponent's HP, and it's the best of 3 rounds. It's certainly an interesting approach for what is essentially a platforming game, but it works really well. There aren't that many fights in the game. It's mainly around the platforming and the puzzles, but yeah, it's pretty good. The main game, as I say, is more of a platforming kind of game. It's isometric, so some of the platforming can be tricky at times because of being isometric. But honestly, it's not too bad compared to a lot of isometric games. Similarly, it has puzzles throughout. The puzzles themselves aren't overly difficult. It normally involves hitting switches or carrying crates around and things like that. They're fun enough, and they kind of add to the experience. The music is fantastic, as is the story, and it's something that's just a blast to play. The interesting gimmick for Dark Savior is that it works on like a parallel system. So even though your main playthrough will take you maybe 4 or 5 hours, there are multiple different parallels. I think there are 5 or 6 in total, but 1 or 2 of them may be shorter from what I understand. I've not done all the parallels just yet, but I expect that throughout the course of all the parallels you're probably looking at maybe 20-25 hours maybe, which is pretty good for a playtime for a game. I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's not something that you can get the Japanese version for because of the heavy story emphasis, but the English version's not too bad. It goes for around 40 quid maybe. So yeah, I would say pick it up and you'll have a lot of fun. It's a good game. The next game on my list is a strange title. I actually came across it recently and it was dirt cheap. I looked at a quick video of it and thought, yeah, should be okay. So I bought it. And I didn't expect it to be one of my favourite games on the Saturn too. The game is called, let me get this title right, Second Arukotowa Sandoahru. For any Japanese speakers out there or any Japanese people, I completely apologise because that's probably not even close. But on the front of the game it says puzzle action, so I'll just call it puzzle action from now on. The game is, it's not really a puzzle game as such. I would call it more of a party game. The game itself plays very much like a WarioWare game. You go through these situations, you mainly involve in walking down the street and an enemy jumps in front of you, and then for some reason you have to play a mini game in order to beat the enemy. It's not even really a competition. You don't see the enemy play the minigame, you just do it yourself. So I don't really see what the story has to do with anything, but whatever. The games themselves are very strange minigames and very varied. You've got some that kind of work on a fighting emphasis, you've got some where you've got to climb up certain objects, one where you've got to memorise like balloons. There's another way you have to put out fires using a swinging hammer. There's another way you have to rub your back with a towel and you get redder and then burst into flames. The humour and the style of the minigames, as I say, it's very much like a mini game, a WarioWare type thing, and it's a lot of fun. The main difficulty is effectively trying to work out what you've got to do. Obviously the instructions are in Japanese, so it makes it even harder, but the games are quite basic, so there's never really anything overly complicated you need to do. So even without the translation, it kind of works like with the WarioWare series, where you've just got a limited amount of time and you've got to work it out as quick as possible and then do it. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's multiplayer as well, so you can play it with more than one person. And the great thing is, I think it's a game no one really knows about, so you can pick it up for very, very cheap. I got my copy for a tenner, and as I say, it's one of the best pickups I've got for the Saturn. So I would definitely recommend it. Even if you're only playing single player, it's still a blast. So there's really no reason for it not to be in your collection, other than obviously not having the ability to play Japanese games, which if you're a Saturn owner, you really need that functionality. The final game on my list was a launch title for the system, but it is actually one of the best. This is Panzer Dragoon. Panzer Dragoon had 3 entries on the Sega Saturn. There was Panzer Dragoon, Panzer Dragoon Zwei, which I'll cover at a later time, and Panzer Dragoon Saga, which I covered in my first episode. Saga is an RPG, which I rate rather highly, but that game can be quite expensive. The first 2 games, however, were rail shooters. If you've ever played something like Star Fox, expect it to be like that. You play some dude, you're on a dragon, you go through these environments and you shoot things. The good thing is you have 360 degrees range of view, so you're not just shooting straight ahead like with something like Star Fox. You can rotate the camera to where the enemies are and fire that way. It's good because it leads to some nice set pieces where you're being pursued by something and your dragon's flying forward and you're shooting behind. It's really good. There are some really interesting locations. The first one's on this beautiful ocean and with all this really nice music playing. And then the second level, you're in a desert and you're being chased by these giant sandworms which look like they're from the Dune series. Yeah, the game is just so good. The only real issue is the difficulty. If you play the easier difficulty modes, if you play easy or normal, you don't actually finish the game. The game stops before it reaches the end and says, "Thanks for playing, now try a harder difficulty." So the only difficulty you can actually beat the game on is hard mode, which is a fair challenge. It's doable with practice once you kind of learn where everything is. It's just a bit of a shame that you don't get the option to play through the game on easy, normal or hard, and do it that way. I mean, Panzer Dragoon Zwei I think had it a little bit better. The difficulty was challenging but not overly difficult, and then you get the ability to choose different difficulty levels after you've beaten the game. And I think something like that would have been a lot better for Panzer Dragoon, but what can you do? It's still a really fun game, and despite that difficulty, it's definitely worth a pop. I mean, the good thing is with the difficulty is it gets harder, quite quickly, but then the later stages are actually a little bit easier, including the final boss. So don't expect it to be impossible by the end just because of how hard the early game is. It's still doable, just keep at it and it's definitely worthwhile playing. So, they're my 5 picks for this time. We had Virtua Cop 2, we had Courier Crisis, which, if you look on the Japanese version, it's Courier Crisis. Great. Dark Savior, Puzzle Action, and Panzer Dragoon. Have you played any of these games before? If you have, drop a comment below and let me know. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, again, drop me a comment and tell me, and maybe I'll cover it in the future. One more thing before I go, the competition is still running for Mobile Suit Gundam Side Story 1. If you want to enter that, look in the description, I'll stick the details there. I'll also stick in the title for the puzzle action game, because if you want to find that, you can stick it on eBay and you can find it that way. Don't go on my pronunciation because you're probably going to spell it wrong. Okay, well, thanks for joining, and I'll see you the next time. Bye bye.